What's up, fellas? I want to make a quick video for you guys before I head to the gym today. As always, thank you for watching my videos. I appreciate it. And today I wanted to make a video presenting to you guys the rationale and an argument for taking your accessories to failure. This is kind of considered stupid training in the modern approach we take with the literature we have. The whole every set needs to be taken to failure notion is dismissed as old school bro science. And that being said, there is a good body of evidence to suggest that when we get to about 3 reps away from failure, we have gotten the majority of the hypertrophic stimulus. And then after that is largely diminished return. So those final 3 reps we have in the tank are giving us a disproportionate amount of fatigue to how much additional stimulus we're getting. This leads to kind of the model that someone like Mike Israetel uses, which is, hey, this would indicate that the most optimal way to present our body with a growth stimulus is to cap it at 3-2 RIR. Don't accrue that additional fatigue. Use that lessened fatigue to let us do more sets. People always throw around the whole volume is the primary driver of hypertrophy, which is partially true. It's partially an oversimplification. We know that proximity to failure and load, mechanical tension all play a factor. It's multifactorial. So saying, oh, volume is the primary driver of hypertrophy. Well, there's a large amount of volume, depending on how we're defining it, whether it's tonnage, whatever, to running a marathon. The total volume that we're moving is enormous, and that does not present a good hypertrophy stimulus, and I don't think people would argue that it does. So there's some load component as far as mechanical tension, there's some range of motion component, there's some metabolite buildup component, and then the other component that we've kind of found is that proximity to failure. And what our evidence kind of suggests is that, okay, hey, we're getting the majority of this benefit at about 3 reps away, maybe 2 reps away from failure, and anything more might be a little bit needless and would be just sacrificing more additional sets that we could be doing. But people will throw that out and be like, this is conclusive, this is what the evidence supports, and this is what we should do. The problem is you're overlooking that there's also literature to support the notion that the vast majority of people don't know their proximity to failure. I would like to find the link if I have the time later. I would love to throw it in the description for you guys, but there was a study basically establishing that people are not remotely accurate when it comes to estimating their repetitions in reserve in training. Like most studies, these aren't super elite athletes who are doing this though. But if we're going to be going with this whole by-the-books, evidence-based approach, we need to take in all of the relevant information, not just, oh, 3 reps in reserve is great. We have to also acknowledge you probably don't know what 3 reps in reserve is. So if we're doing something often and we're practicing gauging our reps in reserve, we're going to get better at it. Just like anything else, assigning an RPE or assigning an RIR to a specific motion is a skill, and the more we do it, the more skilled we get at it. So if someone's a power lifter and they're doing squat, bench, and deadlift at a high frequency, or if they're just training for strength and they've got these core motions that aren't being rotated out, and we're practicing assigning an RIR to these motions, we're going to get relatively skilled at it relatively quickly. Probably more skilled than the people who participated in the study that indicated people can't tell reps in reserve. So we're going to surpass their capabilities as far as our ability to accurately gauge that. So once someone is adept as a powerlifter, they have an accurate gauge of their reps in reserve on specifically the squat, bench, and deadlift, because gauging it is probably motion to motion, then they can definitely get away with that more evidence-based approach of, hey, I'm in a volume phase. I think it's better to do 4 sets of 8, leaving about 3 reps in reserve, than it is to do 1 all-out set where my form might break down and I might be offering myself a less significant hypertrophy stimulus. Once we're at the point where we can accurately gauge that, I would absolutely apply that rationale to the main lifts, the ones that you're very skilled at. When I write a program, more often than not, if we're in a hypertrophy phase, we're favoring multiple sets with a little bit lower or higher proximity to failure, a little further away from failure, get more sets, keep our technique clean, and pose a big stimulus by accumulating multiple submaximal sets. As long as the person's advanced, that is what I favor. But if we get into accessories, motions that we don't do, we only do them once a week, and we only do them for periods of time before we rotate them to another accessory. More than likely, you are not as skilled at assigning RPEs or RIR to those accessory motions that you rotate with time that are tertiary motions. We fall into the category of the people in the study. We can't really say that we're all that accurate with gauging our RIR. And what does this mean? Basically, it means every time I see someone do a leg press and they're programmed for an RPE 8, I guarantee they had at least 8 reps in reserve, which means we're not hitting that threshold of 3 reps in reserve that we need to pose a really significant stimulus. I think the leg press is just an example that I can point to where I never see people training to the RIR that they claim they are. I always hate the whole, like, it's kind of edgy, the whole, if I put a gun to your head, you could do 5 more. That means you had 5 in the tank. That's a little edgy for me, but we'll go with, hey, if I offered you $1 million and I said, hey, you'll be set for the next couple of years if you give me 5 more reps. Suddenly they're going to be able to do it. And RIR isn't supposed to be motivation based. It's supposed to be based on the mechanical tension that your muscles can output. So if you could have done the 5 more, if I offered you $1 million, you had 5 in the tank. And I don't see people being very accurate with that with a lot of their motions, because it's not something that they've become skillful at. If someone's training a squat, bench, and deadlift for a max, they do hit RPE 10s at various points in their programs, so they know what that feels like. If you're only training leg press for 4 weeks at a time every couple of months, and you never hit a 0 RIR set, you have no idea where 0 RIR is, and you're going to fall into that category of people who can't accurately gauge it. And that's where training to failure, maybe not training to failure, but training a hell of a lot closer to failure than you are, at least as far as a leg press. I think some motions it's perfectly safe to take to mechanical failure. Certainly wouldn't take a leg press to mechanical failure, but you get the general idea of we need to establish where 0 RIR are on these motions if we want to have any chance of accurately hitting them. So, if we're doing a preacher curl machine, taking it to failure is the only way we're going to find that. And what does that look like in practical application? So I just want to give you guys, what are the practical takeaways of what I'm trying to tell you here? 1, if you're training for the squat, bench, and deadlift, you're doing it frequently and you're practicing assigning RIR, stick to leaving some reps in the tank for your higher rep hypertrophy phases. There's nothing wrong with that approach. It's probably the better way to go. 2, accessories, we're probably a little bit less skilled, so we do need to reach failure at some point in our training. So what does that look like? How would we implement that in our training? We kind of have two different ways that we can structure our accessories. 1, which is the way that I would recommend for most people. Let's say we have a generic program, and after we hit bench press, we're going to do tricep press downs, 3 sets of 8 to 12, and we're supposed to do them at RPE 7 or RPE 8, and that's what our program calls for. More than likely, we don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what I call like an RPE audit. We're going to do the first 2 sets exactly how you would. You guess when you failed, you're trying to guess when you reach that 2-3 RIR, and then that final set, you're going to take the same weight you took for the first 2, and you're going to take it to absolute mechanical failure. And if you got more than 2 or 3 reps more than you got on the prior 2, you were inaccurate with gauging them. So A, we get to experience that set. B, we get to experience what taking a set to failure is, what 0 RIR is, and we get a more accurate calibration of what 2 reps in the reserve feels like. So we get that benefit. 2, we get the stimulus that we might have missed out on by kind of bitching out the first 2 sets. So we do get some strong stimulus for the day. And 3, we get to come in next week with different, more realistic expectations for what we should be doing. That's the most practical way to do it, is to implement the final set as a rep out, as an RPE audit on any motion that is safe to do so. And then the other way you can kind of do, which is what a lot of bodybuilders do, partially because it's a little easier on the soft tissue, to push a little bit less volume and dictate your frequencies based on the recovery of your soft tissue rather than your muscles, is to do a high intensity, lower volume hypertrophy focused program. It can absolutely be done. I think that anyone who says otherwise probably hasn't tried it in any meaningful capacity. It might not be the best way, but it absolutely works. What does that look like? Rather than taking 2 straight sets before your failure set, you just take feeder sets up to your failure set. What does that mean? It means we're doing enough to be warm and prepared for the top set, but no more. So we're not taking away from our all-out set that's really driving the progression. So we might take like the empty bar for 12, and then we take like 5 reps at a plate, and then 2 reps, and then we like rep out whatever the hell we were doing. Taking that feeder set, low volume, high intensity approach can also works really well for some people. I think that you would be remiss not to try it at some point in your training career, because I have seen some people respond a hell of a lot better to a little bit lower volume and hitting a really, really maximal set of 8 to 12 and a single one and saving their energy up to that 8 to 12 set. I've seen some people respond a lot better to that than building sub-maximal volume, which is what works, I would say, for more people. But you'd be remiss not to check if you fall into that category of people that I've seen respond better to this methodology. I've found that for my leg training, I've gotten significantly better results since I moved over to a lower volume, higher intensity feeder set method. But the same thing cannot be said for my upper body. So just trialing these things out can be helpful. I hope this video helps some of you. If you have any questions or have any discussion you would like to have in the comments, please let me know. Please don't bully me. I do my best.